properly selfish is an equilibrated state across multiple instantiations of games across a very long period of time in very many social contexts. And so if you're serving that, that's enlightened selfishness, you could say. But it's identical with treating other people in the best possible manner. It's the same thing. And we know that, we have an ethos. Our culture is predicated on an ethos, which is treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated yourself, or maybe more, love thy neighbor as thyself. And that means to act towards your neighbor as if he or she is capable of producing a sequence of Jacob's ladder-like goals across time, and that you're of the same nature, and that will increase the probability that that direction will be the one that makes itself manifest. And that's definitely the case. I mean, I had people in my clinical practice who had become embittered and resentful. They're often naive people, and people generally start out naive, who'd been betrayed. And they regarded their loss of naivety as an increment in wisdom. And you see this with cynical people, right? And they think, well, I was naive and I got burned, and that's not going to happen again. And it's like, fair enough, that actually is an increment in wisdom, but you're in the desert at that point, right? I mean, the naivety wasn't a virtue, and the collapse is a catastrophe, but the place you end up with is not positive. But you're not going to say, well, I'm not going to drop my cynicism and go back to being naive, because that would actually be a reversal of the acquisition of knowledge. Plus, what they say, once burned, twice shy. So then, well, what's the alternative to the cynicism that's induced by malevolence? And the answer to that is something like courageous trust. So imagine that you want to bring the best out of people, even though now you know that there's plenty of the worst there too. And the answer is, well, the question is, how do you do that? And the answer doesn't seem to be by facing everyone with a pervading spirit of distrust and bitterness. That just doesn't seem to work. And you might think, well, that's justified because I've been burned multiple times. Why wouldn't I do that? And the answer has to be something like, because you have the courage not to. Right? If you're not going to fall back into a foolish naivety and not allow yourself to be twisted into nihilism by bitterness, then your option is something like, well, I know perfectly well that you're full of snakes, but I'm going to extend my hand anyway, based on the faith that if you have the courage to do that, that the being that you will call out of the other person is thereby rendered most likely to be of the upward stumbling type. And I think that's the case. You see people who are very sophisticated in their perceptions and social ability, and they can interact even with people who are quite corrupt and still increase the probability quite dramatically that the interaction will be positive. And that's part of that impulse towards the development of an equilibrated state. And so to reach out your hand like that to your fallen brother, let's say, without being naive, that's part and parcel of acting out that highest order conception of the self. That's the logos. That's how that works.